There is a number that almost nobody outside of central banking circles talks about openly, and that number is $307 trillion. That is the total amount of debt currently sitting in the global financial system. Government debt, corporate debt, household debt, financial institution debt, all of it combined as of right now. $307 trillion. To put that in context, the entire global economy, every product made, every service sold, every salary paid in every country on Earth in an entire year, produces around $105 trillion of output, which means the world owes nearly 3 times what it earns in a full year. And here's the part that breaks the model. The interest on that debt is no longer cheap. For 14 years, from 2008 to 2022, central banks around the world held interest rates near zero. Borrowing was essentially free. Governments borrowed, corporations borrowed, financial institutions borrowed. The entire architecture of the global financial system was rebuilt around the assumption that money would always be this cheap. It is not cheap anymore. And what happens to a system built for zero rate permanence when rates rise and stay there? That is what this video is about. Not as a prediction. As an autopsy of a system that is already showing the fracture lines. By the end of this video, you will understand the 3 structural breaks that are running through the global financial system simultaneously right now, why the institutions designed to stop a crisis are themselves part of the fragility, and what the mechanism looks like when a financial system that has been held together by credibility for 80 years begins to lose it. Most people who talk about a coming financial collapse focus on debt, and debt is real, but debt alone has never collapsed a financial system. What collapses a financial system is a specific sequence, and that sequence has 3 steps. The first step is already complete. The second is underway. The third is the one nobody wants to name out loud. The first structural fracture is sovereign debt at interest rates that governments cannot actually service without borrowing more to pay the interest. This is not a theoretical risk. It is the current arithmetic of the largest economies on Earth. The United States is paying over $1 trillion per year in interest on its national debt, more than its entire defense budget, more than Medicare, more than any line item except Social Security. The United Kingdom's debt interest payments have tripled in 3 years. France, Italy, and Japan are all running debt to GDP ratios that, at current interest rates, require them to issue new debt simply to pay the interest on existing debt. This is called a debt spiral, and the reason it matters is not that governments will suddenly run out of money in the way a household does. Governments control the institutions that issue currency. The reason it matters is what they are forced to do to keep the spiral from becoming visible. They pressure central banks to keep rates lower than inflation warrants. They issue more short-term debt to reduce immediate interest costs while increasing rollover risk. And they allow inflation to run slightly above target because inflation is the mechanism that silently reduces the real value of debt without any politician having to announce a default. The sovereign debt fracture is not a future risk. It is the current operating condition of most major economies. The question is not whether it exists. The question is how long it can be managed before it becomes unmanageable. But here is where the second fracture intersects with the first. And this intersection is the part of the mechanism that most financial commentary completely misses. The second structural fracture is the central banks themselves, the institutions created to be the lenders of last resort, the backstops that prevent financial panics from becoming depressions, are themselves holding balance sheets that have never been more exposed. During the zero-rate era, central banks around the world purchased trillions of dollars of government bonds and mortgage-backed securities through quantitative easing. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet expanded from under $1 trillion in 2008 to $9 trillion by 2022. The European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan, and the Bank of England ran parallel programs. They bought these assets at prices that reflected near-zero interest rates. Interest rates are no longer near zero. When interest rates rise, bond prices fall. The bonds that central banks bought at peak prices during the low-rate era are now worth substantially less than what was paid for them. The Federal Reserve is currently sitting on unrealized losses estimated at over $1 trillion. It is technically insolvent by any standard accounting definition, holding assets worth less than its liabilities with no equity buffer to absorb the gap. The Fed does not mark its assets to market the way a commercial bank is required to. It carries them at book value, which means the institution designed to prevent the next financial crisis is itself operating with a balance sheet that would trigger regulatory intervention if it belonged to any private institution it regulates. This is not a conspiracy. It is publicly disclosed in the Fed's own financial statements. The problem is not that the Fed will collapse tomorrow. The problem is that a central bank with an impaired balance sheet has less capacity to respond to the next crisis, less room to expand its balance sheet further, less credibility when markets are pricing the risk that the backstop itself is compromised. And this brings us to the third fracture, the one that ties the first 2 together, and that determines whether this is a managed slowdown or something structurally different. Because there's a specific mechanism that has held the global financial system together since 1944 that is now eroding. And once it erodes past a certain threshold, the math changes in a way that no central bank intervention can reverse. The third structural fracture is the loss of coordinated institutional credibility. The global financial system does not run on gold. It does not run on any physical commodity. It runs on the collective belief that the institutions at its center, central banks, the IMF, the World Bank, the BIS, have the capacity and the will to prevent systemic collapse. That belief is not irrational. For 80 years, every time the system approached a genuine breaking point, those institutions intervened and the breaking point was deferred. 1987, 1997, 1998, 2001, 2008, 2020. Every crisis, the same response: cut rates, expand balance sheets, inject liquidity, restore confidence. The system learned that the backstop was real, and that learning is precisely what built the fragility we are now inside, because every intervention that deferred a crisis also allowed larger imbalances to accumulate. Every rate cut that prevented a recession also inflated assets further. Every round of quantitative easing that stabilized the financial system also added to the sovereign debt that the next intervention would have to paper over. The interventions were not free. They were deferred costs, and the accumulation of deferred costs across 8 decades of crisis management is the $307 trillion number we started with. The system is not fragile because institutions failed. The system is fragile because institutions succeeded at deferring, at papering, at extending for long enough that the scale of what needs to be deferred has grown beyond what a credible intervention can contain. The question markets are now beginning to price, quietly, in sovereign spreads, in gold, and the diversification of central bank reserves away from dollars, is not whether the institutions will try to intervene in the next crisis. They will. The question is whether, at this scale of accumulated imbalance, the intervention will be large enough to restore the credibility that makes the next intervention possible. Because that is the specific sequence through which institutional credibility collapses, not in a single dramatic moment. In a sequence of interventions that work slightly less well each time, that require slightly more money each time, that produce slightly less confidence each time, until the market's expectation of rescue becomes the expectation of inadequate rescue. And that shift in expectation is the moment the system's internal logic changes. This is not a prediction of a specific date or a specific trigger. Financial systems do not announce their breaking points in advance. What the mechanism shows is that the 3 fractures, sovereign debt spirals, impaired central bank balance sheets, and eroding institutional credibility, are not separate problems with separate solutions. They are the same problem at 3 different levels of the same system, and they are reinforcing each other simultaneously in a way that has no historical precedent at this scale. Previous debt crises involved individual countries. Previous banking crises involved individual institutions or individual financial systems. What is different now is that the sovereign debt problem, the central bank balance sheet problem, and the credibility problem exist simultaneously inside the institutions that are supposed to solve each other's problems. The sovereign needs the central bank to keep rates manageable. The central bank needs the sovereign to not issue so much debt that markets lose confidence. The credibility of both depends on each other remaining functional. When all 3 are stressed at the same time, the usual circuit breakers do not work, because the circuit breakers are themselves part of the circuit. The autopsy of every previous financial collapse finds the same thing at its center: a system that was held together by an assumption about asset values, about repayment, about institutional capacity, that turned out to be wrong. The assumption underlying the current global financial system is that the institutions at its center have unlimited capacity to backstop unlimited accumulation of imbalance. They do not. Capacity has limits, credibility has limits, the math has limits, and the math, as it always does, will eventually care more about the numbers than about the institution's intentions. That is what the fracture lines are showing. That is what the $307 trillion number means. And that is why the mechanism matters more than any single headline about any single country or any single bank. Because this time, the system is not the risk. The system is the patient. Subscribe if you want to keep reading the mechanism before it becomes the headline. And drop a comment. Do you think there's a version of this where the institutions find a way out? Or is the math already past the point where intention matters?